Thank you very much, Scott, and thank you very much, Shirin, for Shirin, Ming, Jessica, and Pooja for an incredible panel on diversity and inclusion. Um, so I'm Shika, and welcome to the second panel on asset manager and diversity, where we'll be exploring diversity and inclusion from an asset manager perspective. I'd like to I'm delighted to moderate this panel of exceptional experts. Indira Arrington from Ares Management, Dr. Rupini Deepa Rajagopalan from Berenberg Bank, and Martina McPherson from Odo BHF Asset Management. Thank you, Indira, Martina, and Rupini, for joining us today. Could you briefly introduce yourself to our wonderful audience here? Martina, would you like to start off, please?
Sure, great pleasure. Thank you, Shika and Scott and team for organizing this important session. My name is Martina McPherson. I am the head of ESG strategy, which is more my operational role at Odo BHF Asset Management and Private Assets. I'm also the member of the General Management Committee, which highlights the importance that Odo places on ESG matters and when and where we see them as strategic activities. And beyond this, I engage myself very actively in the broader domain of sustainable finance and ESG investing. I'm the president of the Network for Sustainable Financial Markets, a next-gen think tank, and a visiting fellow and guest lecturer at Henley Business School and University of Zurich. Nice to be here.
Thank you so much, Martina. Indira, would you like to go next, please?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. Indira Arrington, and I serve as the Global Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Ares Management, reporting to our CEO and our head of HR.
Thank you, Indira. Rupini, would you like to go next, please? Could we wait a couple more minutes for Rupini to join, please? Sorry for the wait. Hi, Rupini.
Hello, hi everyone.
Hi, so could you briefly introduce yourself to the audience here?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Rupini. I head up the ESG office at Berenberg, Wealth and Asset Management. Berenberg is actually the second oldest bank in the world. Not a lot of people know that. So it's actually quite interesting. I joined in 2018 to basically set up the ESG office from scratch. But that doesn't mean Berenberg did not have any ESG strategies. We had been, even before me, so to speak, been investing in charities and foundations. However, my role was to come in to develop the strategy for Berenberg in terms of the policies, where we're going forward, and I've done that since 2018. So that's a little bit about myself. I have a PhD from finance, actually, with Andreas Hoppner, who was my supervisor. I'm sure a lot of you have heard from him or will hear from him. I think have heard from him. And my master's in finance was in St. Andrews. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me. Hope that was enough.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rupini. So I'd like to begin today's panel by asking this question directed at everyone. What brought you to work within the ESG sphere, Martina and Rupini, and to you, Indira, the DEI space, and what key challenges have you come across and are trying to solve in the DEI space? Indira, would you like to go first?
Sure, thank you so much. So I I've been doing DEI as a second job my whole career. To give you a little bit on my background, I started my career on the business side. I actually did everything from rating asset-backed securities at S&P, so rating agency. I was in sales and trading. My last line role, I was an equity derivative sales trader. And I have almost always been either the only female and definitely the only female of color in all of my spaces and all of my teams throughout the last 24 years. So funny enough, because we were talking about gender diversity, I actually moved full time into DEI when I was starting my family. So I've been in DEI almost 12 years. I have an 11 and a half year old. And what really made a difference for me in thinking about sitting on a trading floor where you have to be in by 6:30 in the morning for the 7 a.m. meeting you're entertaining 2 to 3 nights a week. My husband was in a similar role. I really had to take a step back and think about, for me personally, could I feel that I could truly raise children in the way that I wanted to, from a time and a space perspective, sitting in that role and seeing how other women in that role were in a lot of ways struggling to do so. That's when I made the transition full time into DEI. And in the past 12 years, I've been running diversity, equity, and inclusion within banks for global banking and markets at big banks in the US. And I think what I'm trying to solve for is, how do we create an environment within the finance industry that allows women to play every role that they want to play, not just mother, caretaker, etc., but maybe you just need to be able to train for a marathon and not feel that your role is only going to be a success if you are 100% focused from a time perspective and from a space perspective in our industry. And what I'm trying to solve for is, how do we make all of these spaces more equitable, so no matter what your diversity dimensions, you have a shot to succeed and continue to move up within organizations.
Thank you so much, Indira, for sharing that. Martina, would you like to add something to that?
Sure. I think it's interesting to see the journey of all of us in this domain and space. I mean, mine has not been a very linear trajectory, very much more of a pathway with different options / trajectories that led to a very interesting outcome, and now being an ESG, strategic ESG professional. I have a background in law. I had an early interest in social issues, human rights and labor rights. This brought me ultimately back into the work of engagement I do now a lot on, for instance, just transition implications. That's the most recent effort that also looks at social issues quite clearly, but also early in that journey to actually advocate, engage, educate on specific topics related to human capital management. I've actually written on that topic quite over some time, and it will be well reflected in our next and upcoming book, Risk Books, ESG in Portfolio Construction, which will be published this year. And hence, I think it's interesting to see that ESG professionals that have either a strong interest in environmental topics, very often these relate as well to more quantitative issues, that you increasingly see now a diversity of professionals, including myself, who have a well-diversified background. Again, law, having worked in marketing, having worked in research, having worked in and on strategic topics, product development, and so on, that we are also bringing a well-diversified range of topics related to other issues beyond E to the spectrum. And it's quite fair to say that many of the S issues, we're seeing that if we're looking at the discussions around, for instance, the EU social taxonomy, are maybe harder to quantify. They are more qualitative of nature, but as impactful as we have seen now in, for instance, the COVID context and the broader humanitarian health and well-being societal crises that is also very often interlinked with other topics such as environmental issues. If we look at climate justice, for instance, that we are increasingly understanding that our own trajectories for E, S, and G cannot be linear of nature. They need to be interconnected. They need to bring in different experts, areas of expertise that hopefully provide a more complementary and holistic picture for this discussion, for ESG research, ratings assessments, and for the understanding that you need also to connect the dots between a quantitative and a qualitative assessment. And it's very interesting to see that we have started the journey in S very often from a human capital management, especially from a diversity, equality, and inclusion perspective. But we are now also broadening the different type of S issues and topics and are making them really a mainstream debate. And I'm very much looking forward to this discussion as well today.
Thank you very much, Martina. I completely agree with all of your points. Rupini, could you share your experience so far?
Well, I can start off by saying I joined many years ago in the investment banking side and realized, when I got up at 6:30 a.m. working till 2-3 a.m. nonstop, that probably that was not something for me. And one of the reasons why I decided to do my master's and then carry on my PhD with Andreas. And I think that kind of got me thinking, because when I was in investment banking, what were they really doing? So I'm Malaysian by nationality, and I'm not going to say what happens in investment banking in Malaysia, but there's a lot of corruption. I won't say corruption, but a lot of things going behind there, that what happens with the listing. So that got me thinking about what is really good. And interestingly, then when I did my PhD in master, I had no clue what ESG meant. Honestly, I Googled it. This was 2012. And I had really no idea what E, S, and G meant. I remember Andreas talking to me about the PRI, and I was like, what the hell was that? I mean, it really was. But that just got me really interested in the whole idea that, you know what, you can actually do finance, but being good. So what I call finance with the heart. So there's something really good out of it. And that actually got me into it. And then getting concentrated with a PhD, and then now being in the banking and having had experience, of course, investment banking and consulting, working in the US overall. I'm not going to talk about my experience, but the different experiences that I had led me to really, even now, really believe that you can do good, and it's really important. And I think, just if we're talking about experience, I think especially with diversity, as you can see, I'm a brown Indian Malaysian girl sitting in Germany. So that's also another hurdle, I guess we will talk about how it is in a bank and in a German bank, so to speak, and how that is also involved. But I can say we're going in the right way, and that's my experience. It's been so far good, and we can talk about everything else in the future, but this is just my opinion and my views at the moment.
Thank you so much, Rupini. It's really fascinating to hear about that. On that note, I'd like to ask my next question. What kind of investment strategies are your companies specifically using to prioritize DEI criteria in leadership positions across the US, UK, Europe, and globally, and create measurable impact? Martina, would you like to go first, please?
Sure. I think maybe to split this question into two parts. First of all, we look at DEI topics clearly at an entity level. So this is Oddo BHF Asset Management as well as the group. That's the CSR and the HR function. There is a dedicated program for talent management and education in place that enables and hopefully has enabled and supported female participation and distribution across the organization, not just at leadership level. And I think this is an important note and point that we also would want to make today. It's important to see that we have an increasing number of female executives and board members, but it's also as important to create a pipeline and to support this, distribution participation. Oddo BHF Asset Management and the group more specifically have I think already in 2019, launched a dedicated initiative that's been also helping to regularly assess progress and the percentage of females in the entire organization. And if and when how there are gaps being assessed specifically, for instance, our area in the investment management teams, when and where there is a stronger need for female leadership, but also participation and recognition of success of contributions of female members, then we are trying to obviously highlight this progress and trying to also hire into the teams in order to make up for certain gaps. There's also an important note that there's a clear interchange. That means an information exchange, education, learning trainings that we have created as an ESG team together with CSR and HR teams to share some of the best practices and learnings that we're deriving. I'm coming to that point in a moment from the asset management side, where we actually assess third-party companies in regards to their human capital management and DEI practices. And we're trying to exchange that knowledge and learning. And it's maybe by no surprise that the first ever teach-in that we launched also under my new leadership back last year was actually on human capital management practices, together as a joint and collaborative initiative with HR. And we talked specifically about how to look at employees, employee talent management, with a strong focus as well on diversity and equality and inclusion, but not only from a gender perspective. And maybe that's the other note I wanted to make quite quickly. We also need to look in regards to ethnic diversity, in regards to age diversity, in regards to certain maybe religious beliefs, diversity in regards to the entire spectrum of when and where and how diversity issues can be defined. And then the second point is, of course, we are using our own ESG research. We have a proprietary ESG research and ratings model that also takes inputs from multiple data providers. And we look at third-party research, for instance, from Boston Consulting Group, that finds that to establish favorable working conditions for employees that also lead to higher EBIT margins, you also need to have good human capital management practices in place. In McKinsey, and we know that, and I'm sure others will reference the studies as well, again in 2020, but also before that, they regularly find that the top quartile, the companies that have actually top quartile in regards to gender diversity on executive teams, but also beyond, have a higher possibility or are 25% more likely to have an above average profitability than companies that are not undertaking these type of efforts. So we are looking at these just as two examples here, these types of pieces of research, and we are trying to then translate that into equitable means, meaning we are looking specifically for best practices related to social, human capital management, diversity and inclusion, looking at also how and where there is a distribution of certain S factors across the supply chain within the way of how companies engage across the broader stakeholder picture, including the community. And we then try to really build an assessment methodology that is not by coincidence at an aggregated level and across sectors, specifically focusing on S targets. So we have, or KPIs. So that means we have a slight tilt or higher weighting towards S issues on average, even across all sectors. And then, of course, we have a specific sector-specific assessment when and where all of the different type of ESG issues are making a landfall. But again, on average, and we have published some research on this as well, we look specifically at human capital management and broader S issues and topics, because we believe that well-run, well-governed companies on the one hand, but companies also that focus very strongly on social activities, initiatives, and they include policies, practices, and disclosures, that these ultimately will be also the most successful companies in regards to profitability. And that links us back straight away to the two studies as well that I just highlighted.
Thank you, Martina. Indira, would you like to go next, please?
Absolutely. And I just want to emphasize something that Martina said. It has to be holistic. If you truly believe in ESG and DEI as a component of ESG, it has to be built into the way that you do business. So at Aries, we have gone through our own journey of transforming DEI and focusing on embedding it in everything that we do. And like any journey, you have to have a North Star, you have to have a mission. So for us, our DEI strategy and framework aspires to harness the power of difference, to be a force for good. So back to what my colleague said, doing it with a heart, and contribute to the long-term success of Aries, which we truly believe, the companies in which we invest, and the communities in which we operate. So the way that we think of our work is in three pillars. It's our people and culture. So let's start with us internally as a firm. How are we going to attract, develop, engage, and advance our own people and culture at the firm? The second pillar is about business and investment processes. If we believe that DEI leads to higher return on investments, then we have to run it like a business. So how are we operationalizing diversity, equity, and inclusion in order to run it like a business? Are we setting aspirational goals? Do we have scorecards? How are we holding people accountable for the change that we want to see? How are we building DEI into our own investment platform and our investment decisions? And then finally, our own supplier diversity. The last pillar is our communities. How are we, again, because we know that this is an industry issue, right? It's not just happening at our firm. This is something that we need to solve from an industry perspective. So how are we using our industry partnerships like ILPA, Diversity in Action, to, like Martina mentioned, learn best practices, understand what's been solved so we don't have to try to recreate the wheel at Aries, share our own learnings and our own best practices when we have wins. Corporate partnerships, are we supporting the organizations that are doing the hard work of DEI on the ground? And then finally, philanthropy, right? What are we doing to maximize our philanthropic dollars from a DEI lens? So when you think about that whole framework, it's truly about being data-driven, setting KPIs, and being able to hold ourselves accountable, because we believe that what gets measured gets done. So specifically to talent from a pipeline perspective, Martina said it best. It's not just about solving at the board and solving at the executive level. We have to solve for the whole pipeline, because we have to broaden the pie. So we've taken two approaches from a recruitment perspective at Aries. When we looked at our throughput rates from a hiring process, we realized something very simple. If you're not interviewing diversity, the chances of you hiring diversity are zero. And we actually used research from Dr. Stephanie Johnson out of Colorado. She wrote the book Inclusified. She'd done some research that basically showed that if you only had one woman on a slate, statistically, you had a 0% chance of hiring her. So for first round interviews, so for our executive leadership roles, our lateral talent, we now require diverse slates at round one interviews. We have a goal in place of having a minimum of 4 candidates, and half of the candidates have to be diverse. So what we are doing is we're changing our processes to maximize the chances that we get the outcomes that we want to see. So for us, we want to ensure that we are going above and beyond when we're posting our lateral positions to find diverse talent that meets our criteria and ensuring that they get into the first round interviews. So that's one way that we're driving our process to hopefully get us more diversity. From an early talent perspective, we've launched 2 programs. We've launched a program called Explore Aries, which has 2 cohorts of all female, and then back to the ethnicity piece, from an ethnicity perspective, where we have college students applying to join us for an Explore Aries cohort, where we walk them through not getting to learn just our firm, but our industry, how we fit into the broader ecosystem, the different types of careers that you could have in the asset management industry, and then specifically within our firm, what are the different types of roles that they can play? Everything from the back office to the front office, to credit, to real estate, to PE, to really give them a deep dive and an understanding of what they can expect from a career path perspective in joining this industry. Because one of the things that we found is that we just weren't, again, attracting enough diverse talent applying for our positions. And I think that one of our focus areas should be, from an industry-wide perspective, is getting that exposure to diverse students that this industry exists. Because most people, when they think about finance and they think about joining the finance industry, they think about investment banking. They don't realize that there's this whole other space that they could take their skill sets and grow a very profitable and have a very profitable, successful career within our industry. On the diverse talent piece, we have in our industry a huge gap when it comes to African Americans and Black talent in general. So we actually partnered with 2 other asset management firms to fund a nonprofit called Alt Finance to specifically attract diverse talent from HBCUs. We're partnering with Wharton on an institute that will actually provide curriculum to upskill them to be able to interview at our firms and be successful in our summer internships. And then we created a path to actually get them here. So the 3 firms, ourselves, Apollo and Oaktree, are hiring Alt Finance interns, but we're also opening up the universe to any asset management firm that wants to support the nonprofit or post their internships through Alt Finance to hire, because we truly have to build the future pipeline. If not, what we end up doing is just playing musical chairs with this talent. Somebody from another firm takes the couple women from Aries and we rotate them around, and we really have to focus on creating that broader pipeline from analyst all the way up through partner.
Thank you so much, Indira. Very informative indeed. Rupini, what kind of strategies is Berenberg employing to foster diversity and inclusion?
So Indira and Martina has definitely have a lot of input there, and I agree with all of them, everything that they've said. And so I would just like to add on from Berenberg's point of view, I would like to touch on 3 points. I think it's important in terms of diversity. We tackle that in Berenberg from 3 different avenues. So the first one, so wealth and asset management. So I would tackle this in our investment strategy. So how we look at companies and how we target diversity. So one of the things that it comes into play is in proxy voting. So what we do, for example, when we look at the number of, we look at gender in the board specifically, and if we see that there are no female representatives on the board, we have had directly contacted the companies and queried them on this. So we've been doing this a lot in the last year, and I could say that's actually coming back quite positive, that a lot of the companies take our, so to speak, queries quite strongly, and they have even indicated that they would look into this and challenge their own board why it's not that case when we direct these conversations with the CEO. So that is one aspect that we look at it, is with proxy voting and engagement, because we are, end of the day, an active manager. So that's one way to look at it. Of course, Martina has already talked about, the different ESG research and how that tackles in with the different social issues and human capital and so forth. I will not go in depth with that because we do very similar things as well. So that's an additional point in terms of how we tackle this directly with the companies, and that's in proxy voting engagement. On the second hand, so that's the asset management side. And what is interesting in Berenberg, because we are a private bank and wealth and asset management, we're a department, but we're not a separate entity. So which means that we, or I, have an influence or role in Berenberg, the bank per se. So what we've done last year, or end of last year, is actually created a Berenberg sustainability, what I call an executive committee, where we have different heads from different departments on investment banking and so forth, to look and target how just not from DEI perspective, but from a sustainability perspective, how we can grow. And of course, diversity is part of that. And one of the good things about that's going to come out of this is brand new, just so everyone understand here, we launched the ESG office in 2018. So we're a bit of a baby, so to speak, and where we have been, where we are right now is an amazing path, and we have improvements to be made, and that's great. And we're going through this journey just like everyone else, and I'm really happy to be part of it. So with this Berenberg, going back to the Berenberg Sustainability Group, we've yet to name it. So this is how baby this thing is. One of the things is that we also, in terms of hiring, how Indira has talked about the youth, the young folks coming in, we see that problem, exactly what Indira said. When people think about finance, they think about investment banking. Hey, I did that. I thought about in finance and I was straight into investment banking in ECM. who knew what ESG was and where I am now? I hope that changes. So what we're trying to do is we have a program where we have international graduates where we hire from a very, once they come out of the university, and we're looking at also 50% are female. And what we do is that we bring them in and then we put them also in different departments. And what I've seen over the years, when we started this, I think 2017, 2018, nobody wanted to join the ESG office. And now we're having so many people, so many young grads coming in saying, I want to do a rotation in the ESG office. Please try and put me in. And we've seen that change. They want to be part of sustainability. They want to understand how we look at companies, and things are changing. But we need to push that. We need to let the young folks out there understand that there is this opportunity to come in and do good and not just be the bad, evil wolf on the other side. And this involves us even going to universities and talking to students and letting them know, hey, this is a part of finance. It is finance. Look, we are still doing ESG analysis. There's still financial modeling. There's still cash flow understanding. There's a lot of numerical, quantitative, background that's needed in this. But you can also, end of the day, do good. So this is what we're trying to change the mindset. So on the third point is the community. How do we, as Berenberg, affect the community? And one is, of course, internally, we're affecting companies when we go and vote and engage with companies. The other part is the hiring. But the community is also important. So I actually launched Women in Sustainability Network for Frankfurt, I think before COVID times, I would say pre-COVID. And that's one part where we're trying to get a lot of people involved, young folks understanding, just to see and push the whole ESG and diversity agenda out there. So this is what we're doing. As I said, we're a baby, we're growing, we're learning, and I hope we'll be able to stand our mark somewhere and give a little bit of a standing.
Thank you so much, Rupini, for emphasizing all of that and sharing those points. I wanted to know, so in the asset management industry, what kind of barriers impact women's ability to move up within organizations and have executive leadership positions? Rupini, if you would like to go first.
Well, I can say personally from experiences, I'm not trying to be too optimistic or positive, but I have to say so far, I don't know if it's luck or what is it you can call it, but I've never had barriers. Maybe that's bad to say. I'm not sure. Maybe I take that back. I mean, of course, there are challenges that everyone faces, to be in a leadership position and to be, where we are today, so, but what I would like to say is that it's not really barriers. I think barriers is a mindset. Maybe I'm getting philosophical here, but, I've had one thing you need to have is very good mentorship. Someone who supports you, pushes a woman. It could be, it's regardless of gender. Hey, I know I've talked about Andreas a lot of times, but hey, he's the one who made me do my PhD, made me do ESG, and he's a guy. I hope so, Andreas. He is. So, he pushed me to be where I am. And, when I started investment banking, ECM, it's the hardest. It's all men. I was in a group of men, but they supported me. End of the day, I don't really think it's a gender or ethnicity question. It's really about what you bring out. Is the knowledge you have. It's also the confidence that you have. And you must be confident. I think that's a problem with a lot of girls, women out there, that they're not confident enough to push it and do this. And I think that's what you have to go. Sometimes, they have this saying, if you don't know, you just do. Sometimes you just bite it. Believe me, there are things that I've gone into meetings that I have no clue about, but I go in headstrong. I learn from it. I come out, write the things that I don't know, come back the next meeting, and I've researched everything, and I've gone in even better. So we have to take out that there's barriers and challenges. I'm sure there are barriers and challenges for a lot of people. But I say, number one, try and get the mentor to support you. Be confident enough and do it. That's my experience. And then learn. Knowledge is very important. Learning. I still learn every day. I'm reading, and that's how you can come in. That's my view. Hey.
And I love your view, and it fits in right into this little theory that I have on talent and the ability to move up within organizations. I call it the three-legged stool. And the first, right, because if you're missing a leg, it'll fall over. The first leg is talent. Are you truly honing yourself to be the subject matter expert of your craft? Are you giving and showing up more than 100% every day? The second one is executive presence. So do you act, sound, and look like a leader, right? Do you have that confidence and that gravitas where people would be willing to bet on you? Because that third leg is sponsorship. And I think it's really important for everyone to have mentors. And mentors are a relationship that you can ask someone to mentor you, that, like you mentioned, Rupini, can inspire you, can make you think about your progress and where you could be much bigger than you may the dream for yourself. But I think the main thing that prevents women from moving up is sponsorship. Women are over mentored and under sponsored. And sponsors versus mentors, it's a very different relationship because sponsorship is a power relationship. It's someone who has the power within an organization to open doors for you, to advocate for that promotion, to help get you that chance of taking that role that's going to make a critical difference in your success. And unfortunately, for women and for ethnic minorities, we don't get sponsorship at the same rate as white males, which is why when I look up, I see the majority of leaders not looking like us. So one of the things that I think we need to focus on is how do we teach our managers to manage across difference? Because we're human beings. Our nature is going to be to want to sponsor somebody that reminds us of us. We all want our mini-me's, right? The folks that you feel more comfortable with, which prevents managers from giving women and people of color feedback at the same rate, which again hurts us from a career perspective and being able to continue to develop ourselves. So we have started specifically 3 cohorts of women that we're putting through a 6-month coaching program. And at the same time that the women are going through that program, we're also focusing on their managers to ensure that their managers understand that they're going to have to make a differentiated investment in this group of people. If these are top performers and we see that they're not moving up at the same rate as the general population, well, why is that? I jokingly always say, what's happening in your group? Are women getting dumber as we get more senior? Why is it that we're not moving up at the same rate as the men? To bring some levity to it, but helping them see the numbers and the inequity in the numbers then allows us to say, this is why we need you to treat this group differently in order to treat them equitably. This is why we are going to be doing these specific programs for women and for our ethnically diverse team members, because we can see in the numbers that it's not happening on its own. So it's really being able to be intentional about ensuring that we are teaching our managers how to manage across difference and helping them understand why they need to pay an extra level of attention to the folks that don't look like them.
If you don't mind, I just want to concur with Indira in terms of sponsorship. I think that's a really good thing to knock on the head, because I've mentored a lot of people and also then recommended them to a lot of other places. You could exactly say you could be a mentor and you just keep on mentoring the person, but they need to go somewhere. So it's also good for those out there to have a mentor who has a network, who can push the person, even if it doesn't have that, just push and say, here, do this, we will support you. I think that's also a big difference. And I think I totally agree with you. That's amazing. Yeah.
Thank you so much, both. Martina, would you like to add anything to that?
Sure, very much agreeing. I also maybe think through the challenges, and maybe again we have some sort of slight intergenerational divergences here. I've been in this field for 20 years, meaning in professional labor or work. And when I started out also in financial services, the biggest challenge was actually that women were not enabling women, because my predecessors had such a hard climb. They had no interest, no sympathy, no understanding for the challenges that then young women of my generation were facing. And generally that coincided with the fact that the whole discussion around corporate culture, which has arisen, obviously finally been expanded since it started at somewhere in the 1990s, right, has then also led to more understanding and awareness around the major human capital management challenges. And again, challenges that do not only concern really the leadership level, but also female distribution participation across the organization. And that's, again, a far more recent movement. And then I would fully agree with Indira and with Rupini. There has been for a long time, hence a lack of leadership, a lack of mentors, sponsors, maybe even ambassadors speaking up for certain topics related to human capital management practices, including diversity topics and not just gender. And it's interesting, I had that exchange also with Andrea some while back, maybe a decade ago, about us foreigners in diaspora, right? We seem to always have worked that bit harder. We didn't have that linear perspective and trajectory, which I highlighted, that made it quite easy for us to place ourselves in a role and to stick on that specific trajectory. But at the same time, that challenge has become a massive opportunity. So I think, these three different challenges, again, have led to opportunities, but it's also been important to note, and I'm sure we were discussing this in more detail, but there are remaining challenges, and the challenges are linked to culture, linked to maybe lack of leadership, sponsorship, ambassadorship around these topics. They also link to the fact that we as women still have a slightly different life cycle. We know there's specifically events such as motherhood. And I've been mainly challenged and surprised in my own career that the major challenges I've faced in regards of being really professionally challenged was at the time when I needed most the support from an organization I worked for in regards to, having to make a choice between work life and motherhood. And that's, to be honest, an experience I will never personally forget. And I've tried to really mitigate slash to turn around for all the people working for me, especially where I see as well other women being in a similar situation. And I think these challenges prevail. I'm hearing them on a regular and frequent basis, even these days. So again, there are certain aspects where we have moved the debate quite significantly forward, and there are other aspects, maybe when and where certain challenges remain and prevail. And I think being outspoken about it and being actually transparent about it, highlighting the issues and also making them transparent, clear to others, especially as we know, he for she is, and I think you, Rupini, highlighted it, is very much there. He for she is there, the understanding is there, but sometimes we just need to be that extra bit more transparent, more engaging on the issues, challenges we face in order to make sure they will be eradicated.
Thank you so much, Martina. And on that note, I'll open up to the audience for some. So we have some questions here. This is for anyone really. How do you balance your work life if you are a mother, given the lack of structural and social support to keep their careers across the pipeline, given the fact that most of the women lose their jobs not for a lack of confidence, but for a lack of caring support? Indira, would you like to go first?
It's impossible, but we just have to do it. I think let's take this in two key stakeholder groups. Number one, I think our firms, as Martina mentions, have a responsibility to ensure that we're creating a culture that allows for not just mothers, but as we continue to get older, then we have caretaking duties on our parent side. There's so we have to think about caretakers in general. And are we truly creating the environment that allows them to be able to succeed within your organization? And that's everything from the policies that you have from a maternity leave. What are you doing to when people are coming back from maternity and paternity leave to ensure that the transition is working? And again, it doesn't matter what your policy states if when you show up, your manager is creating a different experience for you than what the policy states. So how are we, again, upskilling our managers to be able to truly manage across this diversity dimension, the caregiving dimension. On a personal note, one of the things that I've had to come to terms with is that I can't get an A in every aspect of my life at the same time. There's going to be some times where I need to get an A by being a parent, which means that I may be a B at work, and there's going to be times at work where I have to have an A and I may be a B or a C at parenting. So creating the support structure that you need in order to be successful based on the demands of your job is going to be important. And I used to think that I needed to do it all, that I needed to be the only one that, needed to show up at school for this type of event. I've started to let go of that guilt and started to create an opportunity to, sometimes it's my dad, so their grandfather that's going to show up for this particular game. My husband needs to step up when I can't be there, and I have to be okay with that. Uh, Outsource what you can outsource, right? The lack of support from a caregiving perspective, and not being able to have a babysitter, finding the right daycare, those are also things from a caregiving perspective that firms can help step up. But I think it starts with us understanding that it's hard, and we have to be willing to shift priorities accordingly based on, the way I think about it, where the biggest fire is at that point in time. But I think from a societal perspective, we need to continue to educate around these issues, or we're never going to see equity, because unfortunately for mothers, the majority of the duties do end up falling on us.
If you don't mind, I might come in.
Yes, please,
So
Rupini.
I'm a fresh born mother, I would say. My little boy is 15 months old, so I do have a lot of experience. And yes, it is challenging. And the person who asked this question, thank you for asking this. Yes, it's not about confidence. I think a lot of it is culture. Someone's on. Can someone mute? Right. So it's a little bit about culture. I think it's really important. I believe Martina had some problems with that, I would say, from what I've heard. I'm really lucky, in Germany, just give you a little bit of example, we have maternity leave that supports mothers. So we get like a full year maternity, even slightly paid by the government. So this helps us in that way. It's a little bit sad. I know they understand in the US people are trying to push that, and it's not there. Believe me, my sister lives there and cries every time she had a baby because she had to leave her job. And it's all about caretaking. And when we have that support, not only from the organization, but also from family, that's really important. So to give everyone an example how this has affected me really truly, listen, my little boy is only 15 months. I started to work part-time when he was 6 months, even though in Germany you can take maternity leave even up to 3 years, but one of the reasons why I did that was because of I didn't want this perception. Maybe that's just me. I'm in a leadership role with new colleagues that we brought on board, and I wanted to carry on to be able to support them. So what I did is, with the support, it's very important, just as Indira said, we need to have the support. I asked my husband directly, please, if I go part-time, even just for 2 days, can you take 1 day off, look after a little boy? And I asked his mother, my little boy's grandmother, you take 1 day and look after him, because I want to carry on what I've built. Why do we need, as women, to give that away? If it was my husband, he'd be back at work and he would carry it on, and he supported me and he understood that. And I went back in part-time, and what that only showed, and it showed my boss, that I was willing to still carry on, even though it was just 2 days. And believe me, even that 1 day to go away was hard, because we are a mom. I was breastfeeding. My little boy wanted me all the time. So there were calls where it was Zoom. I had to switch off the camera and I was breastfeeding my little bum bum, but these are things we have to do. It's also about showcasing that we are able to do this. And believe me, I couldn't do all the work I needed to do during part-time. And as Indira said, there are things, as I said, we can't be A all the time. We're probably D, E in grades in some things. But, at least we showcase that. And hey, now I'm back on work. I even got a promotion, even during maternity leave. That just shows this is something, it comes from initiative, it comes from culture from the company, and support. Support is so important for us. I cannot stress that enough. That's for me.
Thank you so much, Rupini. Martina, would you like to add anything to that?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, first of all, striking the right balance is something which you need to find and define at a personal level. And I can see clearly the difference of then other circumstances. For instance, even the COVID crisis, making not just, now versus maybe a few years, a decade ago. I have two different boys in two different age groups. One is 8.5, the other one is not just even yet 3. So with one, I've actually been able to have a much more balanced approach because I had more flexibility. I had support from day one. And again, highlighting here Indira's and Rupini's notes as well of finding levels of support amongst your family and or caretakers and or combination of these to also really have time for yourself, to focus on your work, but to focus on your personal activities as well. Because again, a lot of what we're achieving professionally and personally. And hence you need to define that balance for yourself. And that again is very interlinked, intrinsically interlinked with the circumstances you have and the circumstances even society finds itself within. And again, one of the benefits of COVID is that we have more flexibility, that we can prove remote working works, that we can highlight that you do not have to be 3-4 days a week at work per se, that you can build and actually establish a presence, obviously complete your activities, engage proactively, also with the means of technology. And I think that's one of the big wins out of this COVID crisis, especially for women. And then, of course, policies. There are sort of other areas with outside your specific areas of influence that need to be there in order to support you. And I would again highlight here the jurisdictional differences. Knowing that in Germany you can take a year off or you can distribute the time off even over 2 years, right? And you still will then have 50% of your pay. That type of level of policy support and backing is also something that is just not present in other jurisdictions. I've had this experience that I highlighted, which is linked to an American firm in the Anglo-Saxon jurisdictions, which are fundamentally and inherently operating at a very different level and make it very challenging for women. And Rupini also described it with the example of her sister, to actually maintain the same level of momentum and opportunity for women in particular. So I think there are certain areas with our own remit that we can proactively influence where we need to focus on balance and structure. And then there are other areas that ideally need to provide a backdrop, especially at a policy regulatory level, that enable women as well to have the type of flexibility and opportunity they need to flourish in times, regardless if they are present at the workplace 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 even days a week and or less. As long as they're getting their work done, they're committed, they lead by example, and so on.
And can I just add one more thing about this? I think we as women have to take on the responsibility and own managing our managers. We have to be able to have a very clear and sincere conversations with our managers about what we need, because most of the time I have found they will surprise you. I'll add one more thing on the flexibility. Since I left sales and trading, that first job, the one thing that was non-negotiable for me was flexible work. So I have been on a flexible work arrangement for the past 12 years in every one of my DI jobs. And even transitioning to Aries during COVID, one of the things that I negotiated was, regardless of how we end up post COVID, are we all back in the office, not in the office sometime? I needed flexibility for me. And again, C-suite level position, somehow they agreed to it, which I think speaks to our culture. But don't let anybody take away your power. What your needs are, what your value is. And if your current boss, company isn't giving you what you need, you have to be strong in believing that you'll find it within another employer. And the great war for talent and the great resignation, all of these things only make us more powerful today. So while we have this opportunity, we all have to stand behind the change that we want to see from a longer term perspective, so that our daughters and our future leaders don't have to face the same obstacles that we are facing. And we have to ensure that we teach our managers to, like Martina said, to manage to results, not FaceTime.
Thank you so much, Indira, and thank you all for such a wonderful panel session. And on that note, I'd like to conclude. Thank you so much, and I'll hand over to Scott now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shika, and thank you, everyone. That was absolutely wonderful and beautiful and perfect panel. So we are just about 9 minutes until 4 o'clock GMT time. So we will take a 9-ish minute break. I'll post in the chat for when we can have everyone back for it, and then move on to the next panel. And in the meantime as well, feel free to use the toilet, make yourself a cup of tea, and as Christian has posted in the chat itself, feel free to explore our execushi.com website and have a wee look around. All right, see you soon. Thank you very much.